So we're on the play here, and yeah, lots of card draw. So not knowing the matchup, I think we want to keep this and hope to be able to get ahead with this card advantage, and our opponent doesn't have a fast draw. Unfortunately, we're up against Burn, or at least a red aggressive deck of some variety, so that's going to make things a little bit more difficult than we had anticipated. I'm going to get a basic here and go for the Spreading Seas rather than making another play, because it's possible that our opponent doesn't have more lands, and it also stops an Eidolon from coming down this turn. But it looks like it's actually Goblins, which is unexpected, but could actually be worse for us than Burn, because now this Goblin Pile Driver is being played when we have a hand of blue spells. So this Goblin Guide is going to get in for a hit. I think we want to sacrifice the Flooded Strand and play this Serum Visions. So the Condemn is a pretty good card. I think we do want it. We also drew into a path. So we can path one of these. So I'm going to suspend this Ancestral and plan on pathing away this Goblin Pile Driver this turn. But it looks like our opponent may have an additional Goblin to add to the board. So oh my gosh, Mog Fanatic into Reckless Bushwhacker. That's pretty absurd. So we know we have to path away the Pile Driver, but we're still taking 7 damage. So that's going to drop us all the way down to 7. So we can use the Cryptic command to tap our opponent's creatures. That's one line. We can also play out a Snapcaster Mage for blockers. And I think we might want to go for the Snapcaster Mage line depending on what our opponent does. So it looks like here's a Goblin Bushwhacker. Wow. So now I think we want to just use the Cryptic command to tap down all of our opponent's creatures and to buy us a little bit of time. Looking for a Supreme Verdict now. So we've got that Ancestral. So hopefully we're able to draw into something here. So to be honest, not what we were really looking for. So we can play a Blessed Alliance and kick that. So in order to gain 4. I think that's our plan for this turn, is to just play the Blessed Alliance. So our opponent's likely going to sacrifice one of their 1/1 goblins. That would make the most sense. And let's see what we have on top. So it's actually a Detention Sphere. So force our opponent to sacrifice a creature and gain some life ourselves to stop us from dying at least this turn. So we'll assume that our opponent sacrifices the Goblin Bushwhacker. We'll take 6, fall to 5. We have a path to winning the game. It's just not the best path. Is the best way I can put it. I think we want to pass the turn again and go for a Snapcaster Mage. We can go for Snapcaster Mage on Blessed Alliance, make the same play of gaining 4 life, but it looks like our opponent's going to go for a Goblin Guide here. So instead, we do have the ability to go Snapcaster plus Cryptic Command, which is something worth considering at the very least. But I like the fact that we have the Detention Sphere in our hand, so we can de-sphere away these Goblin Guides on our next turn. So we'll see what we have on top of our deck. And it says Serum Visions. Okay. I think we want to go for Snapcaster Mage on Blessed Alliance. That's the plan. The Frenzied Goblin that already triggered, so we will be able to block with our Snapcaster Mage. And one thing you can do is cast the Blessed Alliance with Escalate with the Snapcaster Mage. So we're going to do that. Same play as before. And our opponent might actually sacrifice a Goblin Guide to play around the Detention Sphere because they do know about the Sphere. We'll see if that actually happens, though. So the Snapcaster Mage, our opponent can sacrifice the Mog Fanatic in order to deal with it. Okay? So that is a possibility. So if our opponent sacks the Mog Fanatic, we would take 6 and fall to 3, but then we would be able to de-sphere away the guides and potentially stabilize. So we're going to draw some more cards here. It's always nice to have that Ancestral come off suspend. Feels good to be able to stay in the game until that happens. And we are going to proceed with the plan of Detention Sphering away these Goblin Guides. And so we have both Condemn and Path at our disposal. I'm going to go ahead and Serum Visions here. So we're just kind of hoping that this turn isn't going to be too bad for us and that we can condemn away this Reckless Bushwhacker and then hold up some counter magic. So interesting, it's going to be Legion Loyalists coming down, as well as a Goblin Bushwhacker. So this was more or less worst case scenario. We do have a play that we can make though. So our opponent has 2 creatures with haste. So we can Ghost Quarter away one of our lands to make sure we have that white source. So I'm going to start with a Condemn. So we can go for the Condemn. Then we can cash in an island of our own to search for plains, and then path away the Bushwhacker. So we're gonna go to 1 here on the attack. So we're still in it, still in the game. Every creature that our opponent presents is lethal. This Flooded Strand is not effective on this board. So I think we want to play this Detention Sphere, although we don't have to. So we have the Celestial Colonnade still, which we could use to block, but I think we want to D-Sphere the Bushwhacker just because it is a lethal threat. And just passing the turn, so we've got Snapcaster. We can get back a Cryptic or a removal spell with it. So since our opponent has peeled another haste creature, we're going to want to go ahead and condemn this. So put that on the bottom. Our opponent's up to 22. There's a Crucible of Worlds, which is not particularly good for us here. I'm going to go ahead and Spreading Seas another one of our opponent's lands to get another draw step. And there's Jace, Architect of Thought. So that can potentially draw us into some gas. So we'll see how our opponent wants to split these. I think we definitely want to take a pile with one of the 1-mana removal spells in it. So we're just going to take the Path and the Condemn here. And because now we have the Condemned Path, we can afford to attack with the Snapcaster. If our opponent draws a haste creature, we can deal with it. So it's not a haste creature, it's going to be Foundry Street Denizit here. So we can plus our Jace. And I think we want to start getting in with this Colonnade to try to end the game. So I'm going to keep the Snapcaster back, keep both Condemn and Path available. We can block with Snapcaster. We don't need to attack with it. But there's a Lightning Bolt, and unfortunately we can't do anything about that, so that's going to be the game. Thought we were going to get... We were so close, clawing, and then just finally, right there at the end, that Lightning Bolt. Wow, that is discouraging. Okay, so we know what our opponent's doing on mono-red Goblins and lots of haste creatures. So it's kind of like Burn. It's a little bit different, obviously, but we're going to board similarly. So we want the Core Firewalkers. That is going to be a great card for us if we can get it down. So we have 3 of those on the board. I also like Celestial Purge as well as kind of an all-purpose removal spell. Now what I don't think we need is the negate and dispels because we saw mostly creatures in our opponent's deck. So I think we can take out Crucible of Worlds. The Spreading Seas just don't seem that great. Our opponent has a pretty straightforward mountain mana base. So the Porphyry Nodes is the other card I think we can consider. So that could potentially deal with a bunch of opposing creatures, it is a little bit slow. That's the downside to it. But I do want to try it, so I'm going to board it in the matchup. And since we have that card, I think we can take out some counter magic. So I'm going to take out a Cryptic and a Mana Leak. And just kind of load up on removal. If we get a Firewalker into play, which we have one in our hand, I think we're a heavy favorite to win. So definitely going to keep here. Now, as I say that, I'm just realizing that Firewalker does get swept away by Porphyr Nodes and Supreme Verdict. So that's a little bit of a non-bow. But even so, and we have not really drawn cards off of our opponent's Goblin Guides, which is pretty frustrating. So I'm going to land this core Firewalker now. And that's going to, I mean, if our opponent doesn't have an answer for it, it's going to make things really difficult on the other side of the table. Now, we're sitting pretty at this point. Not too much to worry about. We can sit here, gain some life. And I think we want to play this Porphyr Nodes, actually. Although it's close, because eventually it will eat our own core Firewalker. But at that point, hopefully, we'll be in a very good spot. So I like putting the Porphyr Nodes into play. And we have Celestial Purge at the ready. So we know that our opponent is basically the 8-whack Bushwhacker deck. Both Goblin Bushwhacker and Reckless Bushwhacker. So definitely we should be ready for that. Here's Mog War Marshal coming down. So it looks like our opponent's going to continue to extend into this Porphyr Nodes, which is going to make the nodes even better. Because we're going to be able to get rid of these opposing threats. But it looks like our opponent's just going to get aggressive here. And we want to block the Foundry Street Denizen. I don't think we need to use the Celestial Purge here. So I'm going to get rid of the Mog Fanatic with the Porphyr Nodes. And we have an opportunity to land a Jace Architect of Thought. And this opportunity feels a little too good to pass up to me. So we can play Jace and tick it up. So our opponent's not going to have great attacks. So I like that. And we can potentially leverage the Jace so that it's going to gain us a lot of card advantage moving forward. Last game, it was pretty frustrating that Jace died prematurely. Or not prematurely, I should say. It didn't gain us enough card advantage because we died. So the Mog Fanatic's going to get sacrificed. We haven't seen any Bushwhackers yet, so it's pretty likely our opponent does have one. But now it looks like taking the more conservative approach, leaving these goblins back. And I'm okay with just ticking up the Jace. I don't think we need to draw cards with it just yet. So this is just the conservative line, essentially. Our opponent realizes that Porphyr Nodes is going to start eating away these creatures. So now our opponent is going to make a pretty aggressive attack. So eventually our own core Firewalker is going to die to the Porphyr nodes, but at that point, it'll have done a lot of work. And now that our Jace is at 8, I feel pretty comfortable taking it down, and this is great. So now another Firewalker, a Nodes, and a Snare. So we're just going to take the Firewalker here, for sure. Card's just amazing in the matchup. Suspend Ancestral sounds good. We could get in for 2 with the Firewalker, but then our opponent might have a haste creature, so I think we're better off just leaving it back and playing for a longer game and letting this Firewalker die. It is definitely sad, though, to see it go. So let's take some more cards off of Jace. Now, maybe our opponent has something like a Lightning Bolt to get rid of Jace, but I think we still want to aggressively take it down. I'm going to choose the pile with the Serum Visions to try to give us some card filtering. So let's see what we can pick up here. And that's perfect. There's an Elspeth Suns Champion, which we definitely want. So I'm going to put the Elspeth on top. We can use that as a way to win the game. And then also play out a core Firewalker. So our opponent's got a bunch of cards in hand that they've been waiting to cast. So here's a Pile Driver, but we're going to be able to gain some life back here. And I'm not sure that... I guess our opponent does have Legion Loyalists in our deck. That's an answer to Elspeth. So definitely something to think about. Meaning that we can't block with the tokens. To clarify that the Legion Loyalists can help when you attack with 3 or more creatures. It prevents us from blocking with the soldiers we would be making with our Elspeth. But because we have the path, I think we still want to just jam the Elspeth into play. We also have Celestial Purge. So this is going to make us some blockers. And we have this Supreme Verdict, which we can use later if for some reason this doesn't work out. But I think this should work for us. So here's a Goblin Guide. That's not a big deal. And there's the Bushwhacker. We knew it was coming. There it is. But we have a Jace that ticked up, and we also have 3 soldiers now. So it's not too scary. Even the second one, I think we're in a good spot here. Our opponent's completely hellbent now. Sure, they can make it an attack, but we have Jace, so the Jace is going to shrink a lot of these creatures down. I think we want to Celestial Purge away one of our opponent's creatures for sure, so I'm going to go for the Pile Driver there. And I'm just going to block the 3 biggest threats our opponent has. So both of our Planeswalkers are going to stay in play. And that should be pretty much game. So we're able to untap. We can tick Elspeth up. And our opponent sees the writing on the wall. So we have forced a game 3 successfully. And looking at our sideboard, do we feel like any changes should be made? That's a good question. I think we may want the mana leak over one of the detention spheres, so I'm going to make that little change because the detention spheres as a removal spell, they're good if you can get multiple creatures, but it seems like our opponent may realize that at this point. And so I'm going to do that. Now, we don't have the Firewalker in our hand, which is the most important card, but we do have lands and spells that are decent, at least in the matchup, so I'm going to keep this hand. And there's a Supreme Verdict. That's a nice pickup. I like leading on the Colonnade and to try to get these tap lands into play so that once we get to turn 4, hopefully we get to turn 4, first of all. There's a Bushwhacker, so that's going to be 4 damage coming across. It's not the end of the world. Hopefully our opponent doesn't have more Bushwhackers where those came from, essentially. So I want to hold up the Condemn. Don't even feel the need to suspend the Ancestral Vision yet, because once we get to that point 4 turns from now, we should be fine. So it looks like another Bushwhacker, Reckless Bushwhacker, is going to come down now. And we can condemn that. So we're in some hot water, taking 4 more down to 9. Opponent's got 2 cards left. So we can next turn play the Supreme Verdict. So I think we want to put the Hallowed Fountain into play tapped. But if our opponent has another Bushwhacker, it's going to be really bad for us. We could use the Snapcaster Mage simply as a way to soak up some damage, so I think we want to just leave up the Snapcaster. We're going to Verdict next turn no matter what. Alright, so if our opponent just attacks with these two, I think we do just go to 7. And if our opponent extends into this board, that's even better for us. It's just another creature that we can Wrath away. Now our opponent doesn't know that we have Supreme Verdict, of course. So I understand playing the pile driver there to try to force the action, but now we are dead to 2 lightning bolts. We've seen lightning bolts, and if our opponent has a Bushwhacker turn here, that's also really bad for us. So we're sweating it a little bit, but that turn, we're safe for at least 1 turn here. So I think we want to, we can either play, I'm fine with playing Jace out and plussing. I think we definitely want to plus in case of haste creatures. So yeah, I'm going to do that. And next turn we can potentially minus Jace and look for a Firewalker. So our opponent found a Goblin Guide. And it looks like a Bushwhacker. So the Jace is going to mean that these creatures are shrunk a little bit. But now if our opponent has a Bolt, we're just dead. Now our opponent didn't have a Bolt, so that's on that front, okay, that's good. But we're still in a little bit of a rough spot. The Porphyr nodes at this point isn't going to be that good because we need to deal with these creatures immediately. We don't have the time we would like to be able to nodes things away. I'm actually going to tick this Jace down because we have Supreme Verdict plus Condemn. It's a little bit risky, this tick down, but we found multiple good cards here. So the core Firewalker is great. Also, the land plus Condemn there's an argument for that pile as well. But I think we want to take the core Firewalker pile. And I'm just going to play out the Firewalker here and pass the turn. But if our opponent does have a Bolt, which they do, that's super frustrating. So I don't know why our opponent didn't immediately Bolt us. But that's going to resolve, and that's going to be the match.